Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a second. I'm just going to let everyone filter in. If you hear a dog in the background, that's my dog. Please forgive me. It takes a few minutes for everybody to come in, so we'll get started in just a minute. I think we have reached a critical mass, so I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining. I know that there are a lot of competing interests and quite a bit of Zoom fatigue these days, so we're honored that you're willing to spend this hour with us. Just so you know, this conversation is being recorded, so you all can share it out with your friends and family afterwards, and we'll share it on the Questa website, and I'm sure Race Matters will share as well. I'm Emma Saperstein. I'm the curator of the Harold J. Miosi Art Gallery at Questa College. We start all of our virtual events with a land acknowledgement, and I know that many of you may be joining from outside the area, but we always acknowledge the land, the history of the land that the Questa College campus is located on. So I'll start with that. The Harold J. Miosi Art Gallery gratefully acknowledges that our gallery rests on the traditional lands of the coastal band of the Chumash Nation, including the Abispeno, members of the Chumashan language family, and any other native tribes who made their homes along the west coast of Central California. As a step towards acknowledging and honoring this sovereign nation, our organization pledges a commitment to Indigenous rights and cultural equity. Since we have gathered digitally, we will be honoring the Indigenous people whose land many of us are physically gathered on. We do this as a way of acknowledging the people who were present in San Luis Obispo as the past, present, and future caretakers of the land. We recognize that achieving healing and reconciliation will be a long relationship with sustained commitment, but with this land acknowledgement, the Miosi Gallery hopes to raise awareness about the histories that are often suppressed or forgotten. This event that you're sitting in on is the third event of our monthly laboratory series, which is a conversation series with Black identified artists and is in collaboration and solidarity with Race Matters San Luis Obispo. Our next event will be on October 29th with Alana Clark. I'll share more information about that at the end. Some background on Race Matters. Race Matters SLO County is a Black-led, multiracial organization of volunteers whose mission is to center the lived experiences of Black and other people of color through anti-racist education, cultural projects, and rapid response to racial and social injustice, especially necessary in our predominantly white populated community. Race Matters envisions a community that pushes no one to the margins, celebrates diversity, and works together for racial and social justice. To hear about other upcoming Race Matters events or sign up to volunteer, you can go to their website, which I'll post in the chat in a moment. I also wanted to share a bit about the Miosi Gallery at Questa College. The Miosi Art Gallery is a gallery space presenting temporary exhibitions of contemporary art that show new and challenging work from national and international artists. We strive to be a collaborative and comprehensive program that engages our students and the public in exhibition, education, and public art, fostering cross-disciplinary engagement and a deepened and diverse cultural understanding. We work to present our program in a unique and welcoming environment in which visitors can experience the work in an explorative and supportive community, and we remain engaged and active in this role in the virtual space. So the session today should be about an hour, or between an hour and a half, depending on your questions. I'll introduce Peter and give him the floor. After he shares a little bit about his work, he will be joined in conversation with two local San Luis Obispo men, Tracy Morgan and Antoine Bird. I'll rejoin the conversation at the end to introduce audience questions. On the back end, we have my dear student, Sophie Stebbins, supporting the screen sharing, and Natalie Bowers assisting in fielding the Q&A, so big thanks to them for helping out. These things are always better if there's lots of engagement, so we hope that you'll use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to introduce questions along the way. Natalie will be helping to filter those, and then at the end, I'll introduce them to the group. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Peter. Peter J. Harris is a writer, producer, publisher, broadcaster, educator, and founding director of the Black Man of Happiness Project, a creative, intellectual, and artistic exploration of Black men and joy. Harris has won the American Book Award in 2015, the Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Award in 2015 and 1993, Since the 1970s, Harris has published his book, poetry, essays, and fiction in a wide range of national publications. So I will disappear. I will see you all soon, and I will hand the mic over to Peter.
Wanted to plunge you right off the bat in this beautiful illuminated image of Black men. These are all historical photos that my colleague, a great librarian, research librarian named Helen Kate here in Altadena, has been my lead researcher for the past 2 years. Look at these exquisite photos. The frames are by my teammate down in Phoenix, Arizona, Julie Ray Creative is it called. And I wanted to start this way. We have been absolutely overwhelmed, of course, by the painful images of men of African descent and unfortunately anybody who's been abandoned by the serve and protect crowd. And so I wanted to start today by plunging you into these magical images. These are all real human beings. They're not famous, they're not entertainers, they're not people you would recognize. And in fact, many of these folks are dead, I'm sure. So they are now our ancestors as well. So by plunging you into these images, look at these guys, man, they just make me crack up. By plunging you into these images, I wanted to viscerally engage you right off the bat. This is what a Black man of happiness looks like. Now, as we'll talk a little bit further as we move through, I have zero idea what the stories are behind these men and behind these boys. And in fact, I may never know those stories. But what I hope to do with these images, and particularly during this conversation, where I'm using these images as prompts, I want you to think about the men in your life. You know, can you even recognize a Black man who's happy if you've seen him? Have you ever seen one? You know, those are some of the questions I want to have percolating as overtones to our theme, what is a happy Black man, and as undertones to our theme. So one of the great things about seeing these images as we've been doing research is when I see the pictures, actually, I end up coming up with my own story. So you may see, and we intentionally kept the citations small, but you may see some titles. This one's called Photo Booth. And I just sort of came up with my own captions so that I can sort of get engaged with this history. One of the things I like to say about this work is that we're looking at individuality across time. We're looking at folks who live their lives, some of them well-dressed as these gentlemen, some of them as poor as the young boys obviously looked in the clothes they were wearing. But for me, I always had a haunting, like calling feeling that this was important work for me to do. Many years ago, a friend of mine who's an anthropologist, her name is Sheila Walker, she turned me on to a guy who is an archivist at the United States Archives. And we got on the phone. He was very polite and courteous because Sheila is like an internationally known, sort of like Zora Neale Hurston type person. And he says, well, what are you doing, Mr. Harris? What can I do to help you? And I said, well, you know, what I want to do is find a series. I want to do some excavation work. I want to find a series of historical photos where Black men and boys sort of quote unquote read as joyful and as happy. And the dude was shocked. He couldn't even conceive of the concept that I was throwing on the table. And he says, well, you know, Black history, so much of Black history hasn't been about happiness and hasn't been happy at all. I said, yeah, cool, but, and I told him that you know, if the avatar of American history, Thomas Jefferson, could write that the pursuit of happiness was an unalienable right, I said, well, surely the people who he owned legally and the descendants of those folks, counting myself, my dad is from Virginia. I said, surely we have as much claim on that unalienable right as he did. And I just broke the circuit a bit. Frankly, we never did find any photos. I was living in California at the time in the archives. I wasn't very savvy online anyway. So around 2017, I had to move up to Altadena, California from LA. And I got a library card at the Altadena Central Library. So I've been getting library cards wherever I live since I was a child, thanks to my own mother. Let's say her name, June Harris. So June Harris always said, you gotta have a library card. So I would start going to the library, and I started just all of a sudden observing who behind the counter looked interesting and engaged with the patrons in a way that showed that they were curious about the work that the patrons were bringing to the table. They weren't just clerks trying to check people out, move them through the line, but they really engaged. And along the way, I met a woman named Melissa Aldama. She was one of the librarians. And I got introduced to her by another friend. And I finally said to her in the fall of 17, I said, you know, I'm working on this project. I call it the Black Man of Happiness Project. And I really would like some help finding historical photos of Black men and boys who look happy. And her eyes lit up. She says, wow, that's kind of interesting. I've never heard of that project before, or something like that. So she got so hyped. She says, look, you know, most librarians, as particularly like at a joint like Altadena, which is a small suburban town above Pasadena, said most of us live for something like this. And sure enough, we set a meeting up, and she invited Helen Kate, who also worked at the library. So Helen got assigned to begin the outreach to, among other places, the U.S. Archives, Library of Congress, Schomburg, and universities around the country and around the world. And of course, she's much younger than me, and she was much more savvy about the internet than I was. So here's the quick story. So Ms. Kate starts writing on my behalf within 2 or 3 days after our meeting. This is December 2017. And so she begins to say, dear Library of Congress, I got a patron here who's looking for historical photos of Black men and boys, quote, emanating a sense of joy. Now, so I give her credit every time we use that. Emanating a sense of joy. I just about fell out my chair when she first, you know, shared that turn of phrase. And I said, Helen, you have just consolidated over 20 years of thinking about this work in that one turn of phrase. And so now we are absolutely engaged in excavating historical, what we call legacy photos, such as the ones you just saw, you know, of men and boys emanating a sense of joy. And as you can see, when you see those framed photos, as I just showed them to you, the glow is there, even if it's not just the glow around that collage that started off these remarks. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I'm going to grab my book real quick. I'm going to read you a couple of short excerpts because I think they capture some of the power behind what I'm searching for. From now on, I am making happiness the key enzyme, the untapped catalyst, the missing ingredient to all of my individual, organizational, and community social justice work targeted at, choose one, the Black man, men and boys of color. We now say BIPOC. That's a term I just heard recently. I've never used it before. It's a little harsh for me. I like a little more singing sound. At-risk youth. But with all due respect to religion, to the greatness of the struggle, with much respect to valuable social service of every kind, getting beyond our pursuit of happiness to actually claiming happiness is the necessary 21st century mission to refuel ourselves, to tap the cultural creativity bequeathed to us by the African American Odyssey, and to tap our own unique personal endowments. So, fancy way of saying, I'm plunging into, with this project, what I call an oral history of happiness. And when we bring Mr. Bird and Mr. Morgan in later, we're going to just really sort of zero in on a moment in their lives when they have been happy. Now, let's be real. There is death alive in the land. People are dying because of everything that we all know about. I don't do understatement, so I'm just going to just let you know I'm aware, very much so, of the social dynamics that we face in our society and have. In fact, this time frame we're in, I consider more as much as a peak experience that grows out of a wave of easily traceable historical venom, historical assaults, historical everything from lynching to gang violence for that matter. Anything that has targeted and dehumanized Black men, and that's what I'm talking about. Let's be equally clear. This project is not about anti-women. It is not to exclude the dangers that women literally live in our society. But right now, the doorway into community health with the Black Man of Happiness Project is through the doorway of the lives of African American men and men of the entire African diaspora. So as we get close, I just want to kind of prime some of this. So there's two things going on with the project right now. One, on Instagram at SEEYOU, SEEYOU 24/7, for the past 65 or so weeks, I have posted once a week either a framed historical photo, such as the ones you saw at the beginning. Those photos are actually from the campaign that began in 2018. We kicked it off again. I'm sorry, this thing is popping in my face. We kicked it off again Juneteenth 2020, and we began to post framed photos that Helen and I have been researching. So that's part one of this work. It's called the SEEYOU Black Faces of the Black Man of Happiness campaign. All right, so the second part of what we're doing now is putting together what I'm calling a proof of concept publication. What does that mean? Fancy words again. We'll curate the historical photos. We have over 100 now, thanks to the work that Helen Kate has been doing, along with my own research. We'll curate a batch of those photos. That'll be first part of the publication. Second part of the publication, right now I'm collecting photographs from living master photographers. I'm happy to say that among the many we're coming close to locking in is the great Chester Higgins Jr., who, if you look him up, you'll just be blown away. His work is just astounding. And he was kind enough, because I certainly don't have a large budget, but we do have a respect fee that we're paying people. Our goal with the publication is to attract an agent and a publisher so that we can get a production budget together that we can really blow this thing up. We want a big old glorious book of photographs. When I was growing up, we called it a coffee table book. I might say it more elegantly now. We're trying to get a publisher to publish a fine art book of beautiful images of Black men and Black boys emanating a sense of joy. Now, I'm going to ask our colleague to put back on the screen a photo of Stokely Carmichael. It's called Front Porch. Let's see if we can get that back. Okay, there you go. All right, so let me zero in on this, and then we're going to shift over to our guys so that we can really, really, really engage with whoever's on the other side of this camera. All right, so this photograph, taken in about 1966, 65, by a man named Douglas Gilbert for a magazine that's defunct now. It's called Look Magazine. So here's Stokely Carmichael down in Lowndes County, Alabama, as part of the SNCC Voters' Rights Campaign, all designed to get men like this. And we don't know, unfortunately, the name of the man he's with, and we're still hustling to try to identify him. But that guy on the right represents the men and the women and the children who were disenfranchised in this county in Alabama. Of course, Stokely Carmichael, as we know, and he died as Kwame Ture. At that time, Stokely had the image of the Black power. Even former President Clinton disrespected him at John Lewis's funeral, suggesting that Stokely Carmichael was, of course, the old days we called the bad nigga versus the nice guy in the case of Mr. John Lewis. Total bad dichotomy. As you can see, the reason I wanted to zero in on this photo is because there is no way that Mr. Carmichael is going to be an effective organizer in this insular, dangerous part of Southern America at that time frame if he didn't have the full capacity, including joy, including happiness, including the ability to joke and laugh. And anybody you ever meet who's ever known Mr. Carmichael, Mr. Ture, for those of us who want to honor his latter life, everybody will tell you this is one of the guy had one of the sharpest wits, great listener, deep thinker. And when I saw this photograph, it was on Facebook as people began to fuss back at former President Clinton and say, man, shut your mouth. You don't know nothing about Stokely Carmichael. And we don't really need your opinion, period. And we don't need you shading anybody at the funeral. Get some home training, Governor. You know what I mean? So let me just say one or two things about this. Now, I mentioned earlier, I'm not hiding from the danger of our society. I mean, in fact, when else should we be thinking about happiness and joy, if not in the middle of the time period we're in? We can talk more about that. So this photo, for me, has what I call transformational history pulsing within this dynamic stillness. And here they are sitting on this rural front porch. Mr. Carmichael, urban youngster from New York City, went to Howard University, left Howard to join the struggle, inflamed with a mission to serve. Look at him connecting with this big brother. In DC, we would call him an actual Bama. He's from Bama, Alabama. That's what we used it as an insult when we were growing up. Totally disrespectful. I'm embarrassed, but it's the real truth. Here he is on this porch, both of them brave. Stokely, the city boy from New York, brave enough to go south. The elder, brave enough to host a firebrand. Notice, there are no guns, there are no weapons on display, although violence was actually a living presence, threatening the work to animate democracy for the majority of Lowndes County citizens. fancy way of saying at any given time during this campaign, the Klan, or even folk who were not in the Klan, but who otherwise did not want to surrender any power, could bring their weaponry out almost with impunity, thinking that they could intimidate this gentleman on the right and intimidate this gentleman on the left. So I wanted to sort of get to there. Let me finalize this thing. I want to just share a quick excerpt from a poem, and I hope it'll give you some of the dimensions I'm seeking. And thank you for, you can shift on out of that if you want. Thank you so much. So, the Black man of happiness. I'm gonna pause there just a beat, and I'll ask you, how does that hit you? Does it sound strange? Does it sound foreign? Does it sound impossible? Does it sound paradoxical? Is it something that you can quest to get to? Is it a lost cause? Well, for me, clearly, it is one of the most energizing turns of phrase that's ever been gifted to me as a writer and a creative writer and a poet. So I want to sort of close with this little section. The Black man of happiness. Voyeur translating the surreal privacies of our living metropolis. ID card, a moody hologram tinted in everybody's complexion. Face wet in witness to daily rites of passage. Intoxicated by our sophisticated lives. Naked with peaceful recognition. Game to face dogs. Game to face hysteria. Prone to find trails to safety. Protected always by the commanding serenity that comes from wading with whatever the water brings. Holding hands when a fist is needed. Unclenching when it's just time to know what needs be known. So how about we stop there and let's invite Mr. Bird and Mr. Morgan in, and let's swap a few tales before we segue out of our exchanges into the Q&A. So, gentlemen, wherever you are.
Well, thank you for the introduction and thank you for
There you
sharing.
go.
Yeah, thank you for the vision. It's actually, I think, untapped territory, because like you said before, usually depictions of Black culture is usually focused on the plight and the pain and anguish. I think it's a beautiful thing to capture the moments that aren't captured, which is beauty and happiness and joy, which we all feel. For me personally, I'm a creative sort. I like to play music, I like to write, I make bracelets on the side just to keep the creative juices flowing. But what makes me the happiest is probably being able to share that with people. And it could be something small. It could be a small bracelet. It could be just a simple note with another musician in the room. But I always found that in those moments, I'm truly being my most authentic sense of self. And in that moment, that person is also, whether they're grateful for it or just grateful for the moment that they can share that with me. I guess there's no other way to describe it other than using a story. I used to play for this band and our getup was just ridiculous. We like wore face paint, dressed up,
Nice.
and yeah, it was a whole thing. It was like theater, punk rock, and yeah. And so every performance, we basically were playing these characters, which these characters were also us at the same time. And every night, well, however many shows we played, which wasn't that many, but it was still beautiful nonetheless. Those performances, like we basically brought this energy and dynamic that we shared amongst each other, and it became like this beautiful exchange of energy. And sense of vulnerability too that makes it even more worthwhile. And so
Yeah.
when I'm in those kind of moments, I truly feel like I am the happiest as I can possibly be, which is, it's a gift, I feel like.
Yes. Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. Beautiful. Hey, before Mr. Morgan jumps in, when you mentioned making bracelets, do you have a moment when you took a particular bracelet that you felt like you had poured something unique or special into, and somehow either someone bought it or you gave it to them? And have you ever had a moment like that where it just kind of was a talisman of some kind that really just sort of generated something that we could call happiness?
Yeah, definitely. There are times where I'm just practicing the craft, but when there's people that come into mind, sometimes I don't know how it works, to be honest, but I just feel like there's like this sense of this energy, and that like attracts me to using certain beads and gemstones, and creating these colorful patterns. I have no idea how it works, but sometimes it just like flows right through me like some kind of force that I don't get to feel all that often, but when in those moments, it's a powerful thing.
Yes.
Yeah, especially getting to allowing, being able to share that with people too, and it's almost like a transfer of energy.
Yeah, nice. Wow, sweet. Hey, is Mr. Morgan ready to roll?
Yes, I am. I'm
Oh, come on in here, sir. Come on in here.
Can you see me okay?
Man, you looking wonderful.
Feeling good. Thank you, Mr. Harris and Mr. Bird. It's a pleasure to share the moments. The joy is part of the community, and I'm, much like Antoine, am part of a community that has been sharing a lot of community joy. I've been doing a little bit of architecture, but more music than anything. And a lot of my influence has been doing a jazz jam recently before the whole pandemic broke out. I now appreciate it more than I did at the moment, because there are a lot of moments when family would come through on a regular basis. And because it was a jam, I was able to bring people up on stage, nervous or excited. And it's such a group event that the whole room would be moved by the emotions going on. So for me, that was a constant fluctuation of working with groups of people. But most recently, I have to say, probably teaching. I have a student that I've just been teaching for a couple of weeks now. And her and I were playing djembes outside and had been working on a pattern for a couple of weeks. And we just got together, had a very limited conversation together, and just got into drumming. And we both knew that that's really where we wanted to be. And without discussing how we were going to play the pattern from start to end, we kind of knew what we expected. And it came together to a point of just loving what we were both doing, loving ourselves, because we were really in the moment of communicating through the drum, and getting to that point of emanating joy back and forth between each other.
Man, golly.
Super powerful. And I remember after I stopped, I wanted to jump up and hug her and talk to her and say, wow, that was more than I expected. But instead we just giggled, smiled at each other, gave a quick high five.
No question. Wow.
Yeah, so it's very eminent in this community, and that's probably the most fortunate part of living in San Luis Obispo for me, is sharing the joy of connection and love through music.
I call that that experience and this idea of that thing that flows through Mr. Bird when he's making, and it doesn't happen with every jam session. It doesn't happen with every piece of jewelry.
Correct.
That's why I call it ecstatic insight. I mean, I love when turns of moments become a string of moments. And the next thing you know, you just kind of got this thing rolling up and down your spine. And I mean, you don't have to call it happiness. You don't have to call it joy. Call it whatever you want. I genuinely don't care. I just think that for me, what I want is for more brothers to be safe enough in their lives to have what I call less time between those peaks of experience, less time between that ecstasy, that bliss, that thrill, that moment when the drum is locked, when the bass is in, when you're channeling whatever the melody is. Less time between that, pang, pang, that's the new chain, and more time between the valleys.
Mm.
This is about as close as I get to mathematics. But I can feel it, even though I sometimes get it confused. But I really mean this. I mean, so often we have really a lot of ugly shit happens, like bang, 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 bang. I'm saying, especially over the stuff that we have that we can control, I want more time between the ugly, the abyss, the valleys, the nasty, that transformation, without being in denial or anything of that nature, and less time between the high fives because we have found that pocket. I wonder if that makes any sense to y'all. How do you build that joyful muscle in your lives so that you can create more faster peaks and extend the time for the more difficult stuff?
Well, I'd probably start with realizing the comfort and the love that you have for that moment that you're there, that you're sharing. Mm-hmm. If I'm constantly emanating that point of comfort, I know everybody around me is going to feel less likely to judge me or themselves and just act on the emotions. And as I've been, especially dealing with jams, I realize everybody, we're all the same. Mm-hmm. We all have the same emotions. And when tapped into them, we all share them collectively. So I think I would start with that as far as getting to a level where you're able to feel very comfortable to open the gate to let everybody continuously create that emotion.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Mr. Bird, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was well spoken. I guess piggybacking off that idea, just kind of showing gratitude for those moments when they happen. And those moments could be small, but still showing the same amount of gratitude. I think definitely helps you remember that kind of energy and how you're feeling. And so I'd say I do also believe that there are times when those moments could happen, we might not potentially recognize them. But I feel like if you're in tune and you've shown gratitude for those moments, you'll learn to appreciate them when they come. And I think you might start to notice that they could happen every day. They could happen,
yes,
a lot more often.
In 2010, that's when I started the Black Man of Happiness project. I have been writing about this theme since the mid-90s, and began to write the book that became the Black Man of Happiness book, right in that mid-90s, early 90s. Actually, I had gone through a divorce, my second divorce, and I just was tripping. I just kept saying to myself, Jesus, when am I going to ever be really happy? And then it kind of morphed out to a bigger thing. Well, what is a happy Black man? That's what got me started. Mm-hmm. So in 2010, we wanted to start off by sitting a cross-section of Black men and young men down for a set of video interviews. And actually the clips are on the blackmanofhappiness.com site. But I called a guy I knew, but not very well. We were getting to know each other. And I said, hey, man, you want to come to this video shoot? He said, what's it about? He's kind of all, taciturn and whatnot. I said, well, I want to ask brothers, what is a happy Black man? He said, oh, no, man, I can't come to that. I said, why not? He says, well, because I just don't believe you can have a happy Black man. You can't be a happy Black man. And we had a nice talk, and we dapped, and he did not come to the first session. Now, years later, maybe about 6 to 7 years, I was actually doing a men's group with a Chicano brother named Abel Salas in LA, who runs a magazine called Brooklyn and Boyle. So we brought Black and Latin men in, and lo and behold, the guy who did not want to participate in the shoot chose to come to the men's group. Hmm. And as we went around sharing, you know what he said? He says, you know, when Peter first called me in 2010, I told him, bang, I ain't coming and ain't no way I can be happy. Ain't nobody gonna be happy. I'm gonna make everybody unhappy if I do show up anyway. But he says, you know what? Since then, since I said no, I've had some experiences, and somebody reminded me of a toy record player. Now, I don't know, Mr. Bird, you're probably too young. You don't even know what a record player is, but I'm saying he had one of these toy joints that you opened up. You didn't, you know, do this like an old dude. You just plugged it in and you could actually play a 45 or whatever. He said that when he started thinking about that record player, he started smiling. And he said, you know what? And then when he got the invite to come to the men's thing, he said, you know what? I'm going to go to the circle, and I'm going to admit, sorry, that's not what he said. I'm going to sort of testify and confess maybe that, you know what? I've changed. And that's all I want to suggest with the project. As we've scrolled through those photos, you saw that beautiful one with the three dudes. There's a man standing, he's got his hand on one of the cats. And actually they're more about dignity than joyful emanation. But the guy in the right of the photo has this little smile on his face. Mm-hmm. That's what got me and Miss Kate when we saw it first. And I always look at those three men and say to people, those men will not allow me to say that this project is all about being happy-go-lucky, joyful, blah, 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 blah. No. We are saying happiness is something deep and something that enriches our lives. And we are saying that if we give it life, it may not protect us in a moment. Certainly not from somebody surrounded by three other officers with his knee on our head, or a cop with military gear putting us in a chokehold, or even other brothers who somehow are trapped in their own, what I call their own passion play of violence. So we're not trying to be ridiculous here. We're simply saying that this individual right here, Mr. Bird, this individual here, Mr. Harris, Mr. Morgan, we're individual folks who deserve a full, whole, safe, sound, sane life, however we define it. And I think that's how, as far as I'm concerned, I'm ready to talk to anybody now if they want Q&As. That's how I'd like to resolve this moment. And thank you guys. Let's stay here and see if we got any questions. Or maybe people ready to go home and be happy. Sometimes it's better to be happy than talk about it. But we're ready to talk if anybody has questions.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, all three of you, so much for sharing and your vulnerability. I was really moved. We did have a few questions come in and more are coming in.
Okay.
The first one is for you, Peter. In addition to the photos and the inspiration of being a writer, how does the concept of the Black man of happiness manifest in your own creativity?
Every day. Every day I wake up, I'm just genuinely grateful because this gray hair, I've earned this gray hair. So, you know what I mean? I don't take it for granted no more. In my 20s, I was like, yeah, okay, another day. No, now another day. Oh my God, let's go get it. So fundamentally, I'm just absolutely grateful to be alive because this work is like crafting a poem every second of the day. Because at any given moment, especially now that I have all of these requests out to master photographers, any moment of the day, I might get an email from a photographer who says, wow, look at these 3 pictures. See if you want to choose one for the project. At any given moment, one of those emails might come through. any given moment, I can go into my files and the photos we've already secured. If I need a little pick-me-up, I just open that photo and I see a photo from my friend Daryl Fields in London of a brother jumping with his eyes closed, or another photo. And by the way, we're the living masters we're choosing are men and women, Latino folks, European American folks, folks of different orientations. Here's the detail I want to throw at you. I am saying that right now, Black men, Black people, and Latin folks, and also, but anybody, even the young man in Salt Lake City, right now, our police forces are absolutely, as a class of social organization, they are not operating in our best interest. They are operating in the best interest in a peaked way, because again, this has gone on for years. They're operating in the best, not in our best interest, but in the interest of people who are afraid to see their power diluted or taken away from them. So to more specifically answer the question, every day in my life, I am dedicated to living with this powerful individuality, with this powerful quest for being like you've never, I want to be a dude like you've never seen in your life. That's what I want to say to whoever asked that question.
In line with that, we had lots of questions, Tracy and Antoine, about your musical practices. And people are wondering what bands you are in and looking forward to a time when we can all hang out and share live music again. So we're wondering if either or both of you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your musical practices.
Mr. Bird, go first, please.
All right. So as of right now, I'm not currently in any solid band. I kind of jam here and there when I can with some friends. We're trying to, something's in the works right now, but because of
nice, little mysterious, mysterious.
Something's in the works, yeah. I'll drop some more hints later on or something. But
very nice.
As of right now, it's just kind of we're just working out the kinks. What I do in my free time with music is a lot of practicing, and I produce like these kind of hip hop-esque experimental weird sounds and compositions. Nice. So that's basically what I do for the most part with music is producing, practicing, and playing as much as when I can.
Do you have any like social media handles or anything that people can follow your work on? It's okay if not. If you do, why don't you just put it in the chat?
Okay, yeah, I'll drop the SoundCloud link. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, I first want to follow up on something Mr. Harris said about just being grateful for every day. And I too have lived long enough of a life to be grateful to wake up. And just recently came across a cold and fever for about 5 days. Part of the reason I had not been very social with anybody, but to be here today is just another gift. And it's just carrying through every single day that I'm able to get together and share music with anybody. So in this county, even though everything is shut down in San Luis Obispo, I'm fortunate enough to be able to play a live gig about once a month. I think I have another one set up in Paso Robles at a small coffee bar called Amsterdam. I'm not sure because I haven't seen it and it just opened. As you know, a lot of businesses are closing and opening, but there's a great opportunity out there. I'll put in my link and you can always find out what I'm doing through Tracy Morgan Drums, but it's an opportunity that I'm taking advantage of with the way the times are right now, because I'm able to wake up and take a little more time and call my musician friends that I've known for years in this area and just get together and create, try and connect and get to that next step of performance. So you know, for me, music is an ongoing thing. Every single day, I'm playing, I'm thinking, I'm hearing, I'm singing, I'm dancing. That's what keeps me alive. That's what gets me out of the bed, I have to tell you. And thank goodness for the audience that pulls me to that location to share that love and that joy with everybody. Otherwise, I would still do it at home, but it's more practicing than performing. But with that said, there's a couple of projects going on right now since the bands I have been in have stopped. I am taking momentary jazz gigs, and I'm titling them the Tracy Morgan Jazz Session, and just pulling in players that I can from anywhere in the county. And we're getting together and creating fun, happy moments. It's really nice to see people come out. And I have to tell you, it's powerful how many people are more grateful in these times to share the moment and to share the music than ever before. So, you know, things are good. Even though there's a lot of craziness going on, I have to say I am very happy to be able to be giving more musical opportunities to the community.
I'm excited to hear you play someday
Good.
soon. And we did have a comment come in saying that Tracy Morgan is one of the most positive people on the planet.
Nice.
She's got a big fan out there.
Nice.
I have a question for Peter. I'm so interested in the way that your work blends your creative practice with production and organizing, archiving through projects like the Black Man of Happiness, but also your work with the Inspiration Crib, etc. Can you speak to how your creative practice and your organizing, how those two sides of your work connect or intersect?
Well, I don't think there are any separations between anything at this point in my life. Now, I'm not, with much love and respect for the men and the women who are literally walking the streets. I even know about the young lady, I've learned from Miss Stephanie Allen about the young lady up in your area. So I want to make sure I'm always telling people that, you know, my work is what I would consider, especially at this point in my life, I'm one of your conceptual warriors right now. So I'm not on the front lines. I'm at the myth level, the mythological level. So the thing that I like to say that I do well and that I do right now is I'm going to the heart of the operating and governing myths of our country. So the reason you start, it seems to me, beyond policy, et cetera, with an acknowledgement of the folks who were here when Europeans began to come to this landmass. Well, that is because of the conceptual work that indigenous folks, folks crisscrossing with Black and Latin folks over the years. This is a struggle. So it starts at the idea level. It starts at the mythological level. So if you do the work, I think Ibram Kendi's book in particular, the Stamp from the Beginning, if you really do the homework, you can trace the use of mythology on behalf of a power structure's militaristic approach to populating the landmass here in a place now called the United States of America. In other words, from the Pilgrims to the popes who, you know, as enslaved men and women and children were forced at gunpoint onto slave ships, when they would baptize them on the fly. All of that stuff is designed to dehumanize an enemy, or to enemy. If there's such a word as enemyize, that's what they were doing. So what am I trying to say here? I'm saying that my work, everything I'm doing now is I'm pulling at the strands of the mythological bullshit that's underneath, that undergirds so much. So if I felt like it, because I truly don't watch the guy, Donald Trump, give talks or press conferences, but when I've seen him, if you just listen to him, almost everything is about manhood, his bigness, his this, how smart, all that is a masculinity that is drawn out. You can follow it. The television shows about Daniel Boone and James Bond, all this stuff I've actually grown up with. So, you know, that's why I tell people, in and of itself, media doesn't hit you in a way that you can't ever change from. I grew up on James Bond. I thought it was cool at the time because that's what you come into consciousness as you come into consciousness. But all you got to do is come into consciousness, and you'll see it. You'll be able to. So, you know, what I'm trying to say to this question is, the Black Man of Happiness work is really about looking through a different lens. And that's part of what I wanted to say. I didn't say it as cleanly as I wanted to earlier. So right now, Black men are they're bullseyes on their back. And as we know about Miss Taylor, et cetera, no, let's again make sure we know, if you can suspend a moment just for the purposes of our thematic discussion. Again, it's not to devalue any woman's life or any Black woman's life or any Native woman's or Latin woman's life. That's not my issue. And take me to task if you like, but just bear with me for a beat. So we're already in the crosshairs. What I'm proposing with the Happiness, especially the CU project, is to put us in a new crosshairs, in the new frame, in a frame, literally as Miss Julie Ray has designed for me and with me, but also literally through the lens of photographers over the years. I don't know who took the picture of those three elders. I don't know who took the picture of those little kids. I don't know. We have citations and we do a good job. I mean, we do know that Mr. Gilbert took the picture of Stokely and the gentleman in Alabama, and I'm in touch with him actually, but we don't really know as we excavate, but we know these men and these boys were captured in a transformational stillness. And it reflects for me a deep inner life that nobody was bereft of their ability to be live, to live with joy and a sense, even if right surrounding them was a sharecropper setting or an enslaved setting. If you walk right out of the door, you might have to step off the sidewalk because a white person was coming. Mm. Yes, these are ugly, ugly, ugly histories. So I, for one, am absolutely embedding this work in this conceptual resistance. You know, I hope that contributes to something for the person who asked the question. Absolutely.
In line with that, we had a question that I really think any of you can feel free to jump in on. And that is, how do you raise a happy person? And is that specific for happy Black men?
I'll let my brothers go first. I do have some thoughts on it, but y'all go ahead and jump in if you want.
All right. You look like you're ready, Antoine.
Oh, yeah. Sure. I feel like that's the best teaching point from that is probably to show and demonstrate what it means to be happy. And you know, so especially like with children are like the world's greatest impersonators. If they or even teenagers, if they see their parents embodying this sense of joy, true, genuine, authentic joy and happiness, I feel like at some point a lot of that will just kind of subconsciously rub off on them. But I do think it does have to be authentic. And if it is, I find it hard to believe that people would be able to pick up on that, especially children. And I think when you're truly have that sense of joy and emanates out, you're likely to do good things around you. You're likely to be encouraging, loving, compassionate from those people that, you know, you're basically meet day to day. It could be simple things, simple gestures like holding doors open for people, or someone drops something on the floor, some papers, stopping and picking it up, or help people cross the street. I think a lot of those things kind of stem from someone who has like joy in their heart. And I definitely think raising someone, a child will see that and pick up on that and understand at some point, even if it doesn't like click right away. At some point, I think it will, it'll start to manifest into something, into their own consciousness for the most part.
Well said, thank you. My influence most of my life and currently has been through teaching to influence kids. And it's based on a lot of what I was taught and brought up as far as treat people like you want to be treated, the same kindness. And most importantly, what got me to where I am today is the reality that you can be whoever you want to be, Tracy. As you come into yourself and learn yourself, don't let anybody tell you who you can or cannot be. So I carry that theory wholeheartedly in every lesson, especially with children. And one of the things I tell everybody is, there are no bad notes, especially with drums. It's just a beat placed somewhere else. It's a moment of, clarity and comfort within yourself, and then wondering or finding, who you are and who you want to be. So as I raise children, or as I teach children, recently I had some Zoom class experience, which was very challenging, but the more we all got comfortable with it, I was amazed how I learned so much about Zoom from these young elementary school kids. And also learned that they are so reactive, and as Antoine was saying, they're a sponge. They will take, and their filter is so clean. That's what I notice. So they're not inhibited as we are as adults. So if I speak directly and give them the positive opportunity to show themselves, it comes through clearly. So that's my example as I work with children. It's just to really listen clearly, but speak honestly, and don't let other people put up boundaries, because the world is really your oyster, as it should be for all of us.
Hey, and by the way, next Wednesday, my son, my firstborn child,
Nice.
Turns 43 years old. So I actually have helped raise a person who tells me he's happy. And doesn't mean he has so that's why I say there's a difference between being happy and happy-go-lucky. So happy-go-lucky is kind of, kicking your heels up and, Fred Astaireing all across the world. But in fact, happiness, like most things, is work. And so for me, the answer to the question is, well, you work at raising a child into happiness. You work at raising a young adult. And of course, just as you have to be aware of the different seasons that you are in, you have to be aware of the developmental seasons that young people are in as they move on up from elementary school on into adolescence and young adulthood, etc. So here's a thought I also want to make sure I get on the record. All this shit is hard. All this is difficult. This is serious developmental work. And so as Mr. Bird was saying, however you come at this work, you better come with your best, most authentic, unique self or selves, which is cool because you ain't got to be the same self in every setting. And I say these things because if often people forget that the reason they're good at whatever they're good at, depression, I don't mean clinical depression. I mean just the kind of person who's got that down energy all the time, somebody you don't want to have over to have French fries and a hamburger or a plant-based burger in my case, old head vegetarian as I am. But, we work at things and we work hard at things. And it's amazing how I talk to adults sometimes, as I said about the young man, and he was a guy in his 40s, the guy who says, I just don't think there can be no blah, blah, blah. Well, and I just looked at people and said, well, you're a grown ass man. That means you have some choice over your life. Now, this is also why I say the deep tragedy of the lives being cut off. And I don't mean the obvious, like Mr. Rice in Cleveland, or the young man, what's the young brother who had the hood on, who got killed many years ago by Zimmerman. We'll come to him, I know somebody will school me. But so it's obvious that somebody who's in that youthful stage, Mr. Trayvon Martin, thank you. It's obvious that anyone killed or maimed or assaulted, Mr. Arbery, Miss Taylor, it's obvious that somebody in their teens and preteens, like Mr. Rice was, it's obvious when their lives are cut short that we have lost the opportunity for whole futures. Just like in science fiction, what ifs, the whole set of what ifs when somebody's that young and they get snuffed like that. But even if it's somebody my age or somebody in their 40s like Mr. Floyd, we don't know what the next shift or segue or pivot will be. We don't know if a young man has the future of the vaccine for AIDS in his future, because his life has been snuffed. Her life has been snuffed. So it behooves anybody who's trying to raise a child or to educate a child to be honest with them to the limits of their developmental season and station, and to then work every day in powerful incremental ways. See, one of the things that I think we forget is that most change is very incremental, and it has a beautiful bundle of elements in it. Inspiration, sticking your hand on if you're a kid, you stick the knife in the socket and get, it has a tremendous blending of experiences and advice and counsel. I think what I'm pushing out very seriously is to remember to stay complex about all of this stuff. There is no formula to being a happy Black man. There's no formula to being a happy any kind of man. The formula is in open-mindedness. The formula begins with curiosity. That's why I use the word catalyst at the beginning and enzyme at the beginning. We don't know what catalyzes you for your best, but we do know that once you're catalyzed, happiness, joy, whatever, they can become an enzyme which helps you convert stuff. And again, if you start saying happiness is the same as happy-go-lucky, then essentially you're ignoring the danger, the death, the damaging history of our culture and of the way human beings go after each other at our worst. But if you start with happiness as a concept, an ethical concept, where you're literally trying to live a life of some sort of equilibrium, some sort of metabolism that's balanced, then you're starting from a whole new set of foundations. And so that's the way I'd like to throw my answer into this mix for that question.
Thank you, all three of you. I love the connection, and there's actually some other questions that connect this idea of joy with labor, which is I think interesting to explore, particularly in this moment. But for everyone who's listening in, we have a few more questions. I'm gonna keep going with them since they're coming in, and then
that's
I
great.
wanted to offer this to Tracy and Antoine as we wrap up in a few minutes. If you wanted to play some music, I know we discussed that in the pre-call, so I'm gonna propose you for that, and of course you can feel free to decline. But
no pressure, no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. In line with joy and labor, a question came in the current moment of unrest. And this is really for any of you, can feel free to jump in here. How do you balance feelings of sadness and anger, rage, with those of joy and happiness? And how do you find that balance?
Just move molecules around. It's all the same thing. If you're not mad at some of the stuff you're mad at these days, you're not human. If you think you're supposed to be joyful in the middle of some of these viral videos of watching somebody die in real time, you're being too hard on yourself. What's the goal? It seems to me, homeostasis, a sense that no matter what comes your way, you take the time you need to live what needs to be lived. If it's time to grieve, pull away and grieve. If it's time to fight, figure out your way to fight and get at it. If it's time to laugh in the face of danger. Oh, what's that beautiful photograph? I know everybody's seen it, where the woman is standing in total like power and the wind's got blowing her sheer dress, and she's standing in front of these cops with all this motherfucking riot gear on, as if they need riot gear for somebody like her, when they don't use it for somebody like that punk bitch who killed the people in the church. They take him to Burger King. Get the fuck out of here. Let's get real. So we need a fullness of ourselves. We need to stay human. And you don't have to fight the way someone else fights. If you need respite, take the respite. Because you can't help nobody if you're sick, if you're not healthy, if you're not sane, if you're not whole, if you're not inspired, if you don't have the energy to articulate what it is you're even angry about beyond the visceral. I know I jumped in here on my two brothers, but you're plunging into the very territory that I started my whole project with. The book, Black Man of Happiness, literally starts with me signifying between the lines of an excerpt of Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. And the very next text is a runaway slave ad bought by Thomas Jefferson some 6 to 9, I think it's 9 years before the Declaration was drafted. So I'm saying the same dude telling us all this magical and all this resonant historical language that this is an unalienable right. Meanwhile, he was all about exterminating people and owning people. Same dude, when a guy who was technically owned, his name was Sandy in the ad, a mulatto, that same guy runs away. This guy is talking about, oh my God, I gotta have this dude back. He's costing me money. So that's what I mean by getting to the crux of this stuff by being a whole human being. I don't care if you're European American. I don't care if you're rich. I don't care if you're Black. I don't care if you're Latin, women, gay, straight, trans, whatever. I'm simply saying, be the whole self. You don't have to wear the burden of history, the collar of history. You just need to be aware, and you need to say, well, what am I doing now to put a break on the circuit of that flow of ugly history?
Yes.
And what new peaks am I contributing to of justice or curiosity or collaboration, etc.?
Thank you for that passionate answer, Mr. Harris. I have to agree. More than ever, this is a time where I'm focusing on my balance, and it really comes to be with just digging deep, doing the work, and being honest with myself and expressing all that. Because, you know, I've been around for 50 plus years now, and I'm seeing the same fights, the same injustice. And there are times when I literally walk outside my house and scream,
Yes,
just to feel it, you know? And I think that's a process that we all need to do. We need to share that, we need to talk about it, and we need to also feel the whole gamut of emotions and share the joy and share the conversation all the way around. but it takes the work to be honest with yourself and true, and don't be afraid of the emotions and take that time. And as I've gotten older, I have prioritized my life to balance so that I don't have to be somewhere else, you know, focused on something else, ignoring what is really going on inside me and in front of me. So I highly suggest that we all really dig deep and do that work and tap into those emotions, you know.
You know, really well said, both of you guys. I'm basically just gonna venture on the same kind of in the same way. Yeah, just basically acknowledging where you're at emotionally, spiritually, mentally. So I think it's obviously very easy to, you know, we see images all the time, almost day in and day out. It's been that way since, you know, before I was here. And so it becomes almost like a program. And we're bombarded with that through media and all sorts of places. And it's hard to, it would be hard to attune to your own sense of being and your own personal emotions when you have the outside world constantly feeding you these images. So I think it's very important to acknowledge where you're at on the spectrum and check in with yourself. Like you said, rest when you need to, because I feel personally, I wouldn't be able to be of much contribution if I was in a place where I wasn't able to do that, you know, spiritually, you know, emotionally. And then also recognizing that there will be moments in between those images, or when you might feel other emotions. You know, you might feel happiness, you might feel joy, you might feel, you know, you might be excited for something, and in those particular moments, you shouldn't necessarily have to bear the burden of, like you said, all the history of plight and injustice. That's not to say that you shouldn't acknowledge that too, because those things are supposed to make us feel human. We should feel remorse and feel the pain and frustration, but at the same time, we need to check in with ourselves and make sure that we're able to process these things before doing what we need to do.
Thank you.
That feels like a sweet place to end. Peter, any last words? And then I will invite one or both of you to play music if you're up for it.
All right.
Yeah. First, thanks, guys, for inviting me to this process. I'm just sad that we can't be in the same room together, which was the original idea that Stephanie Allen pitched to me. And so I certainly hope that we'll get that chance. And we'll really show you how we can do this with music playing, literally while I'm testifying or talking the same way I'm talking about all these things. But I do want to say this, one, so practical stuff. As a director wearing my administrative hat of the Black Man of Happiness Project, we invite you, please go absorb, you know, bathe yourself into these marvelous historical images on Instagram at CU 24/7.
And Peter, I'm putting that in the chat so everybody.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah. So, you know, please, I invite you. I have no illusions that we're going to go viral or whatever. I just simply want to contribute something. You know, my sort of musical mentor from my youth was Maurice White, who founded Earth, Wind, and Fire. And one of his songs is called All About Love. And at the end of that song, he says, if there ain't no beauty, you gotta make some beauty. And so I want to absolutely encourage you guys to come see the beauty we're making, but not inventing, but the beauty that we're excavating and representing. And honoring these men and these boys. So please like us up, share, whatever. I saw a note, some people, I think someone asked, is this an open call? Right now, it's not an open call. We don't have the budget for that. But in fact, we will get to that phase if we get the opportunity. The other thing I want to say is this. You know, this is a leap of imagination. This is a quest. I mean, I write about all kinds of stuff, but right now, this is the work that for me feels as the best way to contribute to the challenging times we're in. So there's a story that goes, Paul Robeson, the great human rights man and a flawed human being in his own right, if you read the various biographies, but the great, great human rights singer and culture worker, went to Spain during the Civil War and literally started singing. You know, they set it up so he could sing. He was obviously on a side against the fascists and for the Republicans, but he sings and both sides put down their weapons to listen to him sing. And that's how I think of this work. Catalyst, enzyme, and circuit breaker, insulator. It's the work that for me feels most in my wheelhouse temperamentally. And believe me, I can cuss you out with no problem. I can rant on you with no problem. But as a mid-level elder at this point in my life, I think this is important for me to contribute. This is the tool that I'd like to throw into the conversation. Throw it like confetti. Throw it as a specifically designed set of ways of looking at the world. And, you know, it is creative. It is about, everybody can go into their own scrapbooks and find the photos of the men and boys emanating joy in their family. Everybody can take selfies, for God's sake, at high definition of yourself, laughing, being with your friends. I don't mean to try to sell Negro Modelo or Coors beer. I mean to literally document your life as whole human beings. That's the thing that's driving me. And that's what I hope, if we ever get in the room together, either me and these two brilliant men, or we get to the barbershop with the cat who couldn't show up with us tonight, I want to stay a part of this conversation. And I think it is local, and I think it is very incremental, and it takes not just vulnerability, but risk. It takes the willingness to say to a person, I'm going to actually meet you right here. And no matter whether you're blonde or tall or trans or redneck or even a Trumpian, for God's sake, because I can't get it. I think they're kind of locked out right now, but it's fine. We'll get there. So I'm just simply saying, how do we approach each other in new ways, in ways that are about finding the human connection on behalf of the best principles, the best practices, including democratic allocation of federal, state, county, and local money on behalf of the majority of the citizens, which I think is the most profound part of this Black Lives Matter movement right now, where we're literally talking about defunding the cops, whether we reach that or not, because politics is about compromise. Just having that in the conversation is a hell of a negotiating position to begin to break circuits on some of this ugly, deep, implicit, and explicit bias that leads to this kind of death that we're encountering and dealing with right now.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Peter. And thanks to both of you for joining. Any interest in playing a little music as we exit?
Greatly.
Yeah.
Do you want to take turns? I mean, my vision is I'll just turn off my video and turn off my microphone, and y'all can each play if you want, and then and when you're done, I'll just end the meeting for all. And that.
I'm gonna look through my book of poetry. Y'all might get a brother singing some work here. Y'all play. If I feel like jumping in, I'm gonna jump in.
How are you feeling, Antoine?
I'm feeling pretty good, pretty solid.
Come on, Larry Graham Jr. Come on.
I'm going to remove myself from camera and let you all take it away.
Right. Uh-huh.
People clapping at home.
Don't be foiled or fooled by the zip code. The ocean is ours. The mountain is ours. The river is ours. The forest is ours. The sky is ours. No to anything less than horizons and freedom and justice and peace and humanity day in and day out. Day in and day out, flooding the calendar with baptisms and holidays and democracy, festivals and meetings and resolution. I'm down with that. I'm down with that. Pleasure to work with y'all.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Nice. Let my drum speak a little. Take us out, Mr. Bird.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm ready for my evening. Thank you all so much. Thank you for coming, for everyone who attended. Again, we recorded this conversation and I will share it out this coming week. Antoine, Tracy, Peter, thank you for being with us. And I hope you all enjoy your evenings.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thanks for having us. This has been awesome.
Bye.
Joyous day. Enjoy today.